Welcome, everybody. For some of us, it's morning, afternoon, good evening. My name is Lori Milner, and I am a coach, a speaker, a trainer, and an author based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I'm really excited to be collaborating for the second time with Mind Journal. So, really, just so blessed and excited to be with you and share something that has been probably one of my greatest life lessons to date, which is how to lead yourself through uncertainty. So if you don't mind to load the deck for me and we can kick off. So if you woke up tomorrow with no fear, what would you do? So now while you're sitting and thinking about that, I want you to imagine in your mind to draw a circle. And inside that circle is everything in your world as it stands right now. So relationships, health, wealth, financial, work, that sits in the circle. Now I want you to imagine a circle around that. And inside that circle is everything you are wanting to create. Now, if we put that into a picture, this is what we get. The world as it is now is our comfort zone, but all the things we're looking to do to change, the goals, the holidays I'd love to take, the finance, the energy I would love to have, sits in our courage zone. Now, if we had to draw a bridge and we had to go across there, it's really about this bridge of fear. But what is fear? Because we think that's the thing that stops us. But fear is really about uncertainty and discomfort. Because if we're sitting in our comfort zone, it feels easy for us. So we often think, well, what would be the antidote to move into that courage zone? If I need to move into uncertainty, surely the antidote must be certainty. But it's not, because think about it. If you want to do something new and you're saying, well, this is what I know. And if I do that, what if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not perfect? What if I'm judged? What if I fail? And so it's leaving the known that keeps us stuck. And certainty, uncertainty, and discomfort means so many different things to different people, right? It could be that feeling of, I want to speak up in a meeting, but what if I say something and I sound silly? It could be putting yourself forward for a new role. Maybe we've got to let go of something. We know it's not great for us. Often, what's discomfort is self praise, self care. Some of us, it's about being able to say no, set better boundaries, or just starting something different. And the way forward is to understand that the more uncertainty you can comfortably sit in, the more you are going to be able to achieve everything that you are looking to do. So, if certainty is not the antidote to crossing that bridge, I'll tell you what is. And it's progress. Because if you are making progress towards that goal, whether it's just a small step at a time, that momentum is what motivates you. Or sometimes you're creating progress in other areas of your life. And you take what I call confidence capital and we bring that confidence to the unknown. So, what I want to share with you today is my formula for what I call how to create micro wins. A micro win, if you imagine the first Lego brick of a whole creation, it could be a 10-minute walk if you are looking to have more energy. And so the formula is all about how you choose to act. And so the first step is attitude. And attitude is a choice because it's that lens through which we view the world. And we can all choose to have a lens of self-motivation or self-defeat. And when it comes to moving into uncertainty, I always say we've got the attitude towards life and then the attitude towards ourselves. Now, when it comes to the attitude towards how we approach life, my favorite quote from 13th century poet Rumi, he said, live life as though everything's rigged in your favor. So it's that feeling like the universe has got my back as opposed to, okay, what's going to trip me up? And it's really, in psychology, it's called expectancy theory. So if you think about the things that you want to achieve, are you thinking to yourself, I know I can do it, or, well, I'd love to, but these things don't happen for me. So it's that expect the best. And here's an example, because when we say live life as though it's rigged in your favor, it does sound idealistic. But now I know all of us have had times we've had to go somewhere important and we had to drive there. So now you're on the highway, you're going to this important meeting or event, and you hit traffic. and your mind just starts racing and you're going, oh my goodness, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to miss it. And ultimately, what happens? It was just that small intersection. The highway opened up and you got to where you needed to get to. So, did you need to put yourself through that? Or could you just walk into what you are looking to do to say, I'm just trusting it's rigged in my favor? I am going to expect the best. But now let's be realistic, because life doesn't always happen according to our plans, right? Challenge is going to show up. So, now what is your attitude when it doesn't go according to plan? What is the default? Do you blame? Do you shame? Or do you take it in your stride? And if the default doesn't serve you, when you do hit unexpected challenge, what about asking yourself the question, how can I now appreciate this as a gift? So think back to a time. It could be 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 weeks ago. But at the time, it felt like whatever it was the worst thing that happened to you. That relationship broke off. You didn't get the job. You didn't get the house. But then what happened? Time marched on. You could look back and you could say, wow, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have met this person. I wouldn't have found this opportunity, right? So I always say, when you are the dot and you don't have the benefit to look ahead, but you said, right now, how can I appreciate this as a gift? And you really turn suffering into significance. And you say, well, what is this here to teach me? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that becomes your fuel. So the ultimate question is, if you sat in it and said, well, maybe my greatest, what I think is my setback, is really my greatest setup. But now it's also the attitude towards ourselves that helps us to navigate uncertainty. Research says we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. So for the gents on the call, I always say you're in the 12,000 space. For the ladies on the call, we're north of 60,000. But the research says over 80% of these thoughts are negative, battling guilt, shame, the inner critic. But we just replay these thoughts every single day. And now these thoughts, these beliefs run the operating system of our minds. Now, let's go back a second. If you think about our phones are way more sophisticated, because when you've got to do an OS upgrade, you get the notification. It's going to happen at midnight. You wake up, all the bugs are gone. For us, it's a manual process. We need to say, for me to move into this next chapter, what are the thoughts and beliefs that are no longer serving me? Because these run the operating system of the story you tell yourself. And so what is the story? Is it I'm too old, I'm too young, I should have done it in my 20s, I'm bad with numbers, I'm bad at public speaking, I'm an introvert? And remember, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And the story that you're telling yourself is going to affect whether or not you show up to opportunities. So if something comes up, but it requires public speaking, but your story is I'm really bad at it, you're either not going to see it or you're going to make excuses. So from today, to say, I am going to be a master coder and rewrite a story that's going to allow me to step into uncertainty. And apart from our thoughts, it's beliefs. And now we sit with a set of beliefs that are often inherited from parents, maybe from grandparents, maybe from a younger version of ourselves. And I'm going to put some beliefs up on the screen. And you can share it in the chat if you want. Do any of these beliefs resonate with you? Now, for some of us, it's, well, I can only rest if I've worked really hard, or success means I have to grind all day. For some of us, it's stagnation is failure. I can't stand still. If I stand still, what if I don't succeed? Maybe it's I'm too old to pursue my dreams. Now, we've got to question these beliefs, but there is one belief we all hold. And maybe we don't know enough about it to give it a name. And it's really the belief that I'm an imposter and everyone's going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. And what's interesting is the more successful you become, the more apparent this belief shows up, because when you do step into a new role, there's this thing that scares us that says everyone's going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. So I want to give you a way to reframe imposter syndrome. Now, the whole thing's come up, so let me rather take you through it. Think about somewhere where you've traveled before, right? If you've gone somewhere for the first time, all of us have been a tourist. Now, what does it feel like to be a tourist? It's a little bit overwhelming and we're uncertain and we completely over prepare. And we're also a little bit terrified, the language, the public transport. And so we are very risk averse. But now you've been to a place enough times and you become a local. Now, how does it feel when you're a local? Because things are more familiar. You feel more confident. You're going to try new things. You know how the transport works. You've got enough language to get around. You start to take on different things. And then ultimately, we become a guide. And that's when people start coming to you and saying, I'm going here. Can you give me some advice? And often it's your biggest failures that become your biggest learnings that you share with people. No, don't do this. This I did once and it was my biggest mistake. But it's not about feeling like I'm an imposter. It's about saying, what phase am I in? So if you've just stepped into a new role, you're going to feel like a tourist. It's going to feel overwhelming. Maybe you've been there a while longer, okay, it's becoming more familiar, and ultimately you become a guide. So it's always understanding I've got to move through all these three phases until I feel comfortable enough. And as Seth Godin says, if we can embrace imposter syndrome, it's really a sign we are innovating, we're leading, we're creating. Now, what affects attitude is where you put your focus. Now, what happens when challenge shows up? What happens when we have to step into the unknown? Typically, what we do is we focus on everything we cannot control. And when we put our focus on the things we can't control, we get anxious. And I'm not talking chronic anxiety, but those looping thoughts. How am I going to get it all done? And anxiety is an emotion. Now, if you imagine it's your mind shining a flashlight for you and saying, wait a minute, you are either trying to live in the future, you are either trying to be too future focused, or you are trying to control your external world. And so when anxiety shows up, you want to do an audit and you want to say, okay, in the situation right now, what do I know? What don't I know? Who in my work, who in my colleagues, who in this amazing Mind Journal community can I reach out to? Who's been through this before? Sometimes there is stuff that you can influence, you can plan, you could prepare, but it's really making that conscious decision to say, if I cannot control this, I'm going to let go of it. So let's say you've got to have a hard conversation with someone. And what we do is we could plan and we could say, well, I want to say this. This is the tone. If they say this, I'll respond that way. But what we do is we imagine the worst case and we go, this is going to go so badly. And then we bring it back into the present, sometimes weeks before, and we start living it. And if we could just accept, I can't control the response, I can't control the weather, but I can plan. Now, instead, so if we think about what is the process of thinking, it's asking and answering questions all day long. And so when it comes to attitude, if we want a better answer, we have to start with a better question. And we have to say, well, instead of why do I self-sabotage, what can I learn from this? What can I be grateful for? Because with a better question, you are going to start to get a better response. And the quickest way to shift attitude is with gratitude. Because if you focus on, well, I've got this, these are the resources, we start to move our mindset not from what's missing, but this is what's available to me. And you cannot be angry and grateful at the same time. Now, the last part of the story is literally the words that we use to narrate our daily story. Because you think, well, what is the difference of words? But if we were having a conversation and I said to you, I don't know, I think you're mistaken. Doesn't mean anything, right? Okay, so you're mistaken. But if we were having a conversation and I said to you, I think you're a liar, did you just get triggered by that word lie? It made you defensive. It spiked your adrenaline. And so, guys, what are the default words you use every day? When someone says, how are you? Do you go, I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm exhausted. And literally the word we attach to our experience becomes it. And it's patterns of language that create patterns of emotion. So don't say, I'm so furious, but rather, I'm a little peeved, or not, I'm so down, but I'm otherwise. And the two words we need to be so careful of is always and never. Because we often bring our past into our future and we say, well, bad things always happen. Now I've tried this and it never works out for me. So we got to eliminate those today. And ultimately, it's, can we adopt a learning mindset? can we say, okay, so it didn't go well in the past. What did I learn? What could I do differently? But you see, as powerful as a good self talk and a positive attitude can be, it's not enough to create a micro win, because a micro win is taking that first step of action. It's showing yourself that you can do it. And if you stay stuck in your head, you move into analysis paralysis, which is why the second step to act is consistency. Now, when you think about the things you want to achieve, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? I don't have enough time. So, do you think you can find 15 minutes a day? If you check the socials less, check your emails less, everybody can find 15 minutes a day. And that's the beauty of consistency. Because if you said, well, I can take 15 minutes every day to journal, to walk, to meditate, to read, to study, that's going to take you somewhere. And then it's about scheduling, because you can't say, well, I'm planning on doing the walk. It's put it into the calendar, because if it's scheduled, it gets done. But it's remembering that if it's in the calendar, you treat it with the same respect you would any other meeting, because your calendar is a reflection of the commitment to yourself. And if we talk about it, it's a dream. But once it's scheduled, it's locked in there, that's when it becomes real. And why is consistency so powerful? It helps us create habits. It's that automatic behavior. We don't go through this, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? It becomes part of who we are. Now, the gap, because I haven't told you anything you don't know, you know the stuff you should be doing. You schedule it in the calendar, but the gap is it's about showing up to yourself. So if you say tomorrow morning, I'm going to go for the walk, it's about showing up, taking even one step, one squat, one mindful breath. That's the micro win. And why this is so powerful, that's where your confidence comes from. When you show yourself and you keep that promise you make to yourself, that's when your confidence, your self-esteem boosts. It's when you go, I'm going to do it, but then you hit snooze and you break the agreement, you dent your self-esteem. Now, it's not only about what are we doing, but if you think about the goals you want to achieve, what about creating a to-be list? So who would I need to become in order to achieve that goal? Because the person you are now is just who you've practiced being. If you're saying, well, I'm such a procrastinator, well, you've just practiced being a procrastinator. So imagine we could bottle traits. And you said, okay, if I had a little more confidence, a little more boldness, a little more patience, a little more courage, what could I do? And share in the chat with each other, what are some of those to be words for you? But then what you want to do is to say, how do I turn my trait into time? So it's not enough to say, wow, if I had more patience, I would be so much better in conversation. It's to say, well, if I want to be more patient, what's the ritual? Okay, well, before I go into a meeting, I'm going to take a deep breath. If I want to feel more calm in the day, before I do anything, I'm going to set my intention. And so the ritual is what helps you create the trait so that you are living your to-be list. Now, I've said there's so much we can't control, right? We've got goals, we've got dreams, we've got things we need to do, things show up. So what about creating a ritual of certainty? So it's saying, I don't know what's going to happen with the external, but I know that I can control the first and the last 15 minutes of my day. I don't know what's going to happen in the day, but the first and last 15 minutes are mine. And so if you can start to wake up, train yourself to get up 15, 20 minutes earlier, and please, if you can do more, do that. But sometimes we've only got 15 minutes. So you've got to stop binge watching Netflix till 11 so that you can wake up earlier. And why this is so important is as soon as you wake up and you put yourself in the calendar and you take that first 15 minutes to put yourself into a peak state, you have to trigger yourself. If you are letting everyone else trigger you, you're going to start your day in a reactive mode. And if you take one thing from today, do not check your phone as you wake up. Because as soon as you've checked your phone, your messages, your emails, you're going, well, I can't do the walk. I've got this waiting for me. So do what you need to do first and then check in. And maybe you say, well, I just keep hitting snooze. But the only reason you hit snooze is because you haven't made a decision. You haven't committed. And so the morning routine begins the night before. And you say to yourself, okay, what could I do now to set me up for tomorrow? Could I put out my exercise clothes, the username, password? Maybe I'll leave out the book. So as you wake up, you straight into that micro win. And it's not only about the self-care stuff, the nutrition, the hydration, the sleep, the stuff we know. It's also, what are those things that totally energize you from the inside out? What is the thing that is your creative outlet? Because the more we are paying attention to that, that's when you come up with your best ideas, when you get lost in something. And for some of us, it could be baking, painting, cycling, photography, scrapbooking, swimming. You fill in that blank, and then it's making sure that you carve out time, 20 minutes here, an hour here, weekends you love, so that you are filling yourself up, because that's how you show up from a better place. And it's not enough to say, well, I'd love to, get to that painting. I would love to spend more time doing this. You've got to do the verb to be the noun. Because if we keep saying, I really should, I know I must, it's deciding, am I going to be a warning or am I going to be an example? And when it comes to creating micro wins, sometimes when we think too big, that's what paralyzes us. I had a client who said, well, unless I can read 15 pages a day, there's no point to start this book. But I got her to think in paragraphs. I said, well, do you think you could read a paragraph before bed? She said, yes, I can do that. I said, great, there's your micro win. And if you manage the whole page, consider it a bonus. So that's why maybe 15 minutes is too much. Can you think in 5 minutes? If you've got to work on the presentation and you're getting overwhelmed, just think slide 1. Okay, I'm going to do slide 1. And that's the win. So the more we can chunk it down, the more likely we are to begin. Now, there is a barrier to creating micro wins. And it's that we are this culture of instant gratification junkies, right? And it's everything we want is a click away. And then we expect the same with our hobbies or our habits. We go, well, I want to stream my learning curve, or I want to download my new body. I don't want to go through the discomfort of doing it differently. So be aware of that. Now, I know there was a time where you did start something and you kept it up, right? You did the walking, maybe you were drinking more water, but at some point you felt, well, I don't see anything working. I may as well stop. And that brings me to the third step to act. And it's all about trust. Because remember, when you start something, there is a gap between starting to take action and seeing a result. But if you can persevere and just trust the process of creating micro wins, despite a result, but you just keep going, that's when the magic happens. Because eventually you just keep doing it. It sort of feels like overnight, your body feels stronger. You're less emotionally reactive. You've achieved the goal. But then it's turning down the volume of the inner critic who's going, well, you should be further by now. You should be, thinner by now, richer by now, this by now, and just focus on the wins. Now, what stops us from trusting? The first thing is this whole perfectionism. But the difference between a high performer and a perfectionist is focus. You see, a high performer has got high standards, but they will allow an error of failure. They will allow mistakes to say, okay, how can I grow from this? But a perfectionist is so terrified that you will either not just keep, one more word, I just need this perfectly. So you either never finish, or it's just this terrible fear of being judged. And if we can replace perfection with progress, it's not about, no one's expecting you to be perfect. How could you if you're just doing it? But it's, am I better than I was last week? Am I better than I was 2 years ago? Am I evolving? And one of my favorite authors is Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman says that every writer, now fill in the blank, whatever it is for you, but he said every writer has got 1,000,000 bad words inside of them. But to get to the good stuff, you've got to purge. You've got to get all of those 1,000,000 bad words out of you first. And so when I first started writing, it made me feel so much better about myself because, my goodness, there were some horrific first drafts. But then I realized that every bad draft is a micro win to a better one. And it's giving yourself permission just to be a beginner, to say, okay, I know I'm out of my depth, I'm out of my comfort zone, but I know if I keep persevering, I'm going to get there. And the simple process of scheduling something, showing up and taking action creates this gift of self-trust, because what you're doing is you're showing yourself and you go, well, even if it's not perfect, even if I don't feel like it, but I still show myself I can, I bring that confidence to the uncertainty. Now, what really holds us back is fear. And often, we don't really like the word fear. We like to say I'm stressed, but it's really about being fearful. But remember, the fear is always going to be there. So, how do you bring certainty to the fear? And the way you do that is by understanding what fear really is. And we've got three main types of fear. The first is what we call loss pain. So, you focus on everything you're going to lose. So, let's say you want to get fitter, you want to get healthier, and you go, well, I'm going to have to lose all of my favorite foods. Well, I'm going to have to lose time because I'm going to have to exercise. And you focus on everything that's going to go away so you don't start. The second fear is process pain. So if I said to you, maybe one of your goals is to study further, but you've created this awful process in your mind and you go, well, I don't see my friends as it is. So if I'm going to study, it's just going to make my life a nightmare and I'm never going to see anybody. So I may as well not start. And the third is what's called outcome pain, the fear of disappointment. What if I do it, but it doesn't make me happy? What if I lose the weight, but what if I put it back? And what's amazing about fear, it's a projection of your mind. You've created the fear and it's imagining this worst case scenario. So you either go back into your past and you remember a time where something didn't go well and we replay it over and over, or we journey into the future. We imagine something bad that could happen and we start playing that. But what if we played the movie of success? What if we rehearsed that? What if instead of saying, what will I lose? What will I gain? But what if? And if we can focus on that, that is how you move into that uncertainty. We don't know the outcome, but that's a better story. Because we're so focused about taking action, we forget about the cost of inaction. So think about the goals, that thing you've said you've been meaning to do. If we keep letting fear stop us, where are we? 1 year, 6 years, 3 months from now? And what if we rather, instead of letting fear stop us, what if fear was the compass? What if that feeling of, oh, I don't know if I can do it, is really just, but that's where your next growth is. Of course, it's going to scare you. If it was in the comfort zone, it's not going to bother you. So if you can remember, that's my next level of growth. That's why it's bringing up all these feelings in me. I better follow that. So how do we then bring certainty to the things we can't control? Because to an extent, if you want to study, if you want to get fitter, you know how to control that process. You know what to eat, you know how much to exercise, you know how to sleep. To an extent, you can manage it. But there's so much. What if challenge shows up? What if you just have zero visibility? How do you navigate uncertainty in those circumstances? So the first thing is about develop a growth mindset. And we hear about it so much, but not necessarily anyone tells us how. And so the first thing is you decide your next level. Because at school, they tell us what to study, university, tertiary, when we're working. But if you said, for me to get to my next level, I want to do more technical stuff. I need more presentation skills. You decide what that looks like and start taking action. Confidence is really that belief that I know I can figure it out. I know I've started hard things or I've been through challenge, but I always make a plan. We've said question the story, but it's also remembering challenge is part of the journey. We fear it, but if you think how everybody's evolved over these last years from 2020 because of what we all had to go through, you aren't the same person beginning of 2020 to now. And if you said to a bodybuilder, how do you get those amazing muscles? You know what they'll say? I push against incredible resistance to shape my arms. And how does that relate to you? It's remembering that when we are pushing through challenge, when we are going through some of the hardest things, that's what shapes us. That's what prepares us for the next thing. That's how we grow. And rather to think, well, I want to avoid it, it's about, well, that's just part of it. And we also need to acknowledge our wins, right? Because you can't go, well, I'll fake it till I make it, because that's delusion. But if you can look back and you can really acknowledge, wow, I did this. I achieved that. Gee, the me of a year ago could never have done this. That's the evidence. Because you're saying, well, I've shown myself I can do this. So there's the evidence that I can move on to the next thing. And we're not particularly good at acknowledging the things that we've done well. So just acknowledge it, spend some time, give yourself a pat on the back, because it's these incremental nudges over time that leads us through the uncertainty and to our goals. Now, when it comes to big goals, right? Often what tends where we're feeling a lack of control is that we focus completely on the outcome and not on the process. So I'll share a story. In 2018, I had the opportunity to do a TEDx talk. And I remember stepping into it that all I wanted was, I just want the script done because I want to start preparing for the stage. The stage is the glory. And I was at about draft 15 and I thought it was really good. And so I had to send my draft over to my coach and I was really excited. And I get a voicemail back that night. And the voicemail said, Lori, I know you. This is not your best. I really think it's better for you to start again. I was completely crushed, as would anybody be, right? So what do when we get upset? We go scroll through social media. And I was scrolling and I found this post and it said, remember when you wanted what you currently have. Now, what's interesting and the irony is that the talk was called How to Create Micro Wins. And I realized, wow, I'm taking this for granted. This is something that I'm ruining this experience rather than enjoying it. And all I could do was just change my attitude, schedule in time, and keep showing up. Now, if you watch the talk, it's 14 minutes of polish, but it took 8 weeks and 35 drafts to get to 14 minutes of polish. And I never got this lesson until afterwards, because when I finished it, I felt really lost. Now, guys, how many times have you had a goal in mind that you thought to yourself, wow, when I get there, this is the ultimate. This is what's going to make me happy. This is going to change my life. And then you get there and you're going, it's nice, but is this all this is? Is this all there is? And so I felt that level of disappointment. And I remember asking myself, going, okay, what can you learn from this? And what I realized is that had I gone from draft 1 to the stage, I would not have grown. I would not have become the person I needed to. I wouldn't have gained the empathy, the skill set. I wouldn't have had to have dug deep, go through those hard days and really push. And so I'm not saying don't focus on the goal. I'm saying don't put so much emphasis on the outcome. Because what I did is I thought, wow, this is going to change everything. And the truth is, no one cares. It was nice for me. And people, it's a nice thing, but it's not going to shift your world in the way that you think it will. And it's not about just getting to the goal. It's who are you becoming on that journey? Are you proud of the person you are when you get to that goal? Would people say, wow, I'm so happy for you? Or would they go, yeah, you got the goal, but geez, what did you do to get there along the way, to yourself or to other people? And so always keep focusing. And if we don't find joy in the day to day with the ups and the downs, we miss the point. And so it's that process, that journey, which is more important than the outcome itself. We also got to find certainty in ourselves. And so whether that's about acknowledging your wins, having a better self-talk, because the day that you decide to believe in yourself is really the day your life changes. Because if you've got that power behind you, doesn't matter the outcome, doesn't matter the challenges, that is your greatest fuel. And as Marissa Peer said, belief without talent can take you further than talent without belief. But when you've got both, you are unstoppable. Now, if you think about moving into something new, what really is the most uncomfortable thing is that feeling of being out of your depth. Now, if you had a fear of flying on an airplane, you could go do a simulation to practice what turbulence feels like. So that when you're on the plane and you're sitting in actual turbulence, you go, okay, I've experienced this. I know what to do. I'm going to remember my breathing. So how can we do that? How can we go look for new experiences, challenge yourself, go do a new sport, go do a new hobby, pick up, I don't know, if you don't cook, do some cooking, do some painting, something that is a safe way to practice discomfort. If you are someone who really has been wanting to write, but that fear of being exposed is too much for you, go on to medium.com, write for my journal, find a publication that you can say, wow, here's my work. Maybe you put somebody else's name so that it's practicing. Okay, I'm being seen. So what are little comfort challenges you can do that you can practice this feeling of discomfort? And especially if you're the kind of person who's rushing around all day, busy, 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 go all the time, what about the comfort challenge of yoga or meditation? Just being still on the mat, just being quiet, because it's going to push all kinds of buttons in you. You're going to feel like, well, I'm wasting my time. I should be doing something else. But just a few moments of stillness is showing yourself, I don't need to be anywhere except on this exact place for the next 5 minutes. So that will be my challenge to everyone who doesn't practice yet. Let's see how you can do. And we can also find certainty in the people around us, because feelings of overwhelm or despair tend to grow when we keep things to ourselves. And I'm not saying we need a huge circle of friends, but if you can reach out, we've all got those, even if it's one or two people that we could say, I'm facing this situation, or I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And they could say, wow, I went through this, or I've got a person who's been through that. Have you thought about this? And it just brings a different perspective. And then you don't feel so alone. And really, it's about, because when we think about uncertainty, we've got two choices of how we want to move into something. We can choose to focus on fear, or we could choose to focus on faith. You can't see either of them. But the one that you choose to step into the situation with is going to define how you experience it. And for me, what faith is that if you can choose faith, and it's about saying, well, I don't know why this is happening to me. I don't know why this challenge is here. But it's a way of saying, but I believe that it's happening for me and not to me. And again, it's about going into those questions and saying, well, what could I learn? How could I grow? What am I not seeing? And the more that we can step into something with that feeling of faith over fear, again, we can't, control is an illusion, but it's that expect the best. Now, I want to share with you a tool because, often in sessions like these, and Mind Journal are incredible and give such amazing content. And we feel amazing afterwards, right? And we think, wow, I'm going to go and do that. And then ultimately life happens, maybe it's 1 week, 3 weeks later. And you go, I know I should get up. I know what she said, but I'm cross or I'm angry or I don't want to or I'm tired and I'm going to hit snooze. So what do we do on those days? And here's the solution. So if I said to you, are you the same person that you were 5 years ago today? You're going to say no. So then arguably, are you going to be the same person in 5 years' time? No. So now if you can see current you and future you as two different people, you are going to start to make very different decisions in your own best interest. So I want you to take a moment and think about, who is that version of you in 3 and 5 years' time? Where are you working? What are you doing? How are you experiencing your days? What's your energy like? Do you feel joy in the day? Who do you spend your time with? What are you doing on your weekends? What's your finance situation like? And you get this crystal clear idea, right? And let's say one of those things that you're thinking about in your work requires you to do a lot of public speaking. But the you of today has told yourself, no, I'm an introvert. I'm terrible with that. So now in order for you to set future you up for success, current you has to start being authentic to them. And so, yes, it makes you uncomfortable, but you got to remember, if I get this right now, and every time there's an opportunity and I keep showing up to it, it's going to become part of who I am. And getting uncomfortable today is what's going to set me up for success. And so, often we talk about work-life balance, but it's more about work-life choices. And so when you are thinking all the time about this future self, because when you've created a powerful future, that's what gives you a compelling present. Because you also remember that the bumps, the speed bumps, the roadblocks that we hit, okay, that's just part of the journey because I know where I'm going. And so when you find yourself lying in bed going, should I hit snooze? Should I say yes? Should I say no? It's remembering that every decision is either an investment or a cost to our future self. And so that's why we think, well, it's just a glass of water. Does it matter? It's just speaking up in a meeting. Does it matter? But yes, because it's a stacking over time. Now, with the micro wins come the micro fails, and that's just part of life. But you get to make a choice, because we get two kinds of people. You get someone who says, I have 20 years of experience, or someone who has 1 year that they just repeat 20 times. You know that person. They attract the same thing. They keep doing the same things over and over. And so we just need to remember, when mistakes show up, when we do fail, it's not to be feared or shunned or swept under the rug, but to say, okay, how do I bring this lesson and incorporate it? How do I take that and move forward? Okay, so what would I do differently next time? Because once is a mistake, but twice becomes a choice. And the last story that I want to share with you today is in 2016, I had the opportunity I published a book with my co-author, Nadia Bilchik. But a few years before that, I knew I always wanted to write. And I didn't know where to start. So I'd actually reached out to a very well-known journalist in South Africa that I'd recently worked with. Her name was Mandy. And I said, Mandy, I want to write a book. I don't know where to begin. Please, can we have coffee? And she was so kind and so wonderful and gave me such good tips and advice. And I said to her, but I know I want to do interviews. What recorder do you use? And she says, I use this one. I said, great. So I leave there and I'm so excited because I know I'm going to do this. And I get home and I go, you can't start this book project. You don't have a recorder yet. So I order the recorder. And 3 weeks later, it arrives. And I remember opening it and I looked at it and it looked at me. And then I put it into a drawer and I found the next reason why I can't start. And I realized three things. That number one, my excuses meant my fear was winning. Number two is that no one was coming. No one was coming to say, you know, that thing you really want to do, you should do it. But the last was that I hadn't shifted my beliefs, that I am the kind of person that can do this. I hadn't shifted my story. And so my question to you is, what is your recorder equivalent? What are you putting off because you're waiting for someone or something or a bank balance or a degree or a piece of paper to go, well, then I'll be ready. And what if I can be your permission device to say, you know, the thing you want to do, you should do it, and give yourself permission to just do it, even if you don't know what that end result is going to be, but you can take action one micro win at a time and give yourself permission to change that story. And sometimes we look back and we say, well, I've tried it in the past and it didn't work. But if you could look back at your past self with some compassion and say, you know, they did the best they could with the knowledge and the resources available at the time. And so, as Maya Angelou says, do the best until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. So I'm reminding you the 3 steps to create micro wins, the 3 steps to act. Choose a positive attitude and live as though life is rigged in your favor. Consistently schedule in time, show up and take action, create the win and press repeat. And then trust the process of just creating these wins and turn down the volume of the inner critic. And some days you'll need all 3. Some days you'll feel a little stuck and you'll go, well, maybe I am trying to focus on what I can't control. Or maybe I haven't taken action. I'm just still stuck in my head. Or I'm not really trusting the process. I just want things to happen on my timeline. And when we can really take these 3 steps, it allows us to answer the question, okay, is this going to be one day or am I going to make this day one? And in the words of Seth Godin, he said, 12 years from now, your future self is going to thank you for for something you did today, for an asset you began to build, a habit you formed, a seed you planted. Even if you don't know where it will lead, today is the day to begin. And so when you wake up tomorrow and you still aren't sure where to start, rather than say, what do I want to do today? You say, what would future me want me to do today? So when you wake up tomorrow with no fear, what will you have the courage to do? And my wish for you today is that you will have the courage to show up always as your authentic self, not your perfect self. The courage to put yourself into the calendar and the courage to give yourself permission to know that you're enough. So from my side, thank you so much. We're going to open up to Q&A now so that I can take your questions. Also, just a little bit, here are my details. The easiest way to find me and to stay in touch, sign up to my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter I write on all things that I've spoken about today. And you can just go to beyondthedress.co.za. So to the Mind Journal team, should we open up? Thank you so much, everybody. I can see Kurt here, but I'm not seeing, I can't hear. Almost I go into comments. Is someone asking a question? Okay, should I go into the chat then? How can I keep myself calm in triggering places? So is that fine, Mind Journal team, if I just go into the chat to do questions? So that was Olivia's question. How do I keep myself calm in triggering places? So what's really interesting, because that's exactly, and that's the right question to ask, because if we can become aware of what's happening inside, because if you think about a car, right, it's got an early warning system. When you're about to run out of fuel, the fuel light comes on. So we've got the same body wisdom. So let me ask all of you, when you feel triggered, someone says something, you get that rude email, we all have a place where we first feel it in our body. So some people feel like their throat is closing. Some people, their fists clench. Some is in their gut. And if you can feel that body wisdom first going, wow, I've just been triggered. And you can just literally insert a pause to respond rather than react. So Olivia, you could also just feel that you've been triggered and just take a breath. It's just even that 2 or 3 breaths. Sometimes, even if it's something virtual, maybe someone sends a rude email or a WhatsApp, don't respond when you're emotional. Don't respond when you're angry. You could always write something, save it for the morning. But often we think, well, if I don't respond straight away, then I'm going to come across weak. But slowing down in those high pressure moments is the most powerful thing that you can do. So I think definitely use your breath is the first thing that you can do, listening to your body, walking away from the situation, moving into a place where you are feeling calm, and then from that space, approach the situation. And I think always rather pick up the phone than reply something in email. So I hope that that's answered the question. And it's also just, the other thing that often triggers us, maybe it's not someone, is our thoughts. Because the difference between feeling amazing and feeling angry or despair is whether or not you've investigated the thought. And sometimes we go, well, I'm not enough, or this thing will never happen for me. And we have to question it and go, but is that thought true? And when you put the thought under a microscope and realize, no, that's actually not true, you can decide how you want to move ahead, choose a better thought. Mike, how do we overcome the fear of uncertainty? How do we overcome the fear of uncertainty? I think it's changing the relationship to uncertainty. And I think and it's such a great question. And I think the first thing to remember is that control is an illusion. We all try to do so much that we can to control. We want to know what's going to happen. And most of the time we don't. And that's why I said right in the beginning, the more comfortable you can be with feeling uncomfortable, the more you will move through the situation. So to overcome the fear of it, I think it's about saying, okay, I don't know. So then it's about saying, what can I control? And so again, it comes back to that ritual of certainty. What in the situation can I control? Can I put my focus there? Maybe you can't control something in the situation, but I can control, am I doing some exercise in the day? Am I taking care of myself? Could I reach out to somebody? So whatever you can do that's within your control, that's the thing you need to focus on. And maybe it's about saying, well, what's the worst case scenario? If this thing really doesn't go according to how I want, what are some of those options? Okay, so if this really doesn't go well, what are some contingencies I can put in place? So you feeling that you can plan to a point, you can consider all the options, and then at least you've got an armor, you know what to do. And that's why I said the more you can focus on, okay, well, where have I done it? Who can I reach out to? But it's being okay with not knowing. And the more that you show yourself, you know, even though I had no idea, but I just kept doing this or I just focused on that. And most of the time, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. The thing that you fear most of the time doesn't come to pass. So I hope that that's given you some feedback on that. I wanted to ask a question. Narcissistic abuse is so regular; it takes a heavy toll. How can we move? How can one move aside and walk towards their goals? So maybe Kylie, you could just, if you want to, just unmute yourself. When you say narcissistic, are you talking about other people? So how do we manage other people? Okay, otherwise, let me see if I'm understanding it correctly and I'll answer it the best way I can. So sometimes we can't, I think, not sometimes, we can't change other people. And especially narcissistic behavior, we as much as we would love to, there's just certain personality types that are incredibly difficult to shift. So the one thing that you can do in terms of trying to shift that kind of relationship, it's about how do I meet this person's need for significance. So in six human needs theory, there are six basic needs we need to meet, one of which is about that feeling of do I matter? And so if you're struggling with someone, the best way to try and shift a dynamic is to ask for advice. So you could say, I'm looking for a new business book, or you've navigated this industry so well. Do you have any advice for me? And it must come from a genuine place. You could say, I'm looking for a new book. I'm looking for a course. What are your thoughts on managing the situation? And so now that person is starting to feel that they matter, and it's going to start to shift the dynamic towards you. But I think really it's, can you set boundaries? Can you limit conversations? We can't shift them. So again, what in that dynamic can you control? And what could I do to try and shift by meeting their need for significance? So I hope that answers your question. But if it's going to a point of abuse where it's really crossing a line, and you are in a company, then I would say reach out to the human resources. I would say reach out to someone in an organization who can assist you from going through correct protocol and measures. If it really is crossing a line, I think go to someone who's qualified to help lead you through that process. Okay, Kurt, I'm not good at social gatherings or when anyone challenges me. Do I need to believe in myself to boost my confidence? Okay, you absolutely need to believe in yourself. And so maybe some things that you could do is that if you're someone who gets socially anxious and you in a, let's say you're at a party and there's some, there are people, maybe you know them, maybe you don't, and you've got that voice in you that's going, I don't know what to say because I don't add any value and I'm just going to waste their time, or whatever that self-talk is. So the way that you can bring confidence into that situation is ask questions. The more it's, be as interested as you are interesting. And so ask that person about themselves. And there's always 3 starting points because everyone's got a past, present, and a future. So, Kurt, I could say to you, what did you do before you started in this role? What are some of your, what are some of the projects you're working on? I mean, eventually I'm going to be saying, what are you doing for your December vacation, or what's coming up for you? And the more that you can just be curious about someone, tell me about this. How long have you been doing that? Maybe you walk into a room and you can see someone's got a photo of a little girl on their phone or in their office. Wow, tell me, is that your daughter? How old is she? And the more that you can show genuine interest and curiosity, that's where a conversation comes in. And so that's why having that self-belief really matters, because then when someone says, oh, tell me about you, you can share from a place of confidence. Also, something else that you can do is that maybe, whether it's in a social engagement or you've got to do a presentation, often that lack of self-confidence is terrifying, is to shift the focus on, I have to be perfect, I have to get it all right, what if I'm judged, is how do you shift it to a lens of contribution? Okay, well, I'm just here to deliver a message. I'm great at what I do, and I'm just here. So if you can put the focus on them, how do I add value? What can I do? What is the main thing they need to walk away with? Because as soon as we shift the focus onto us, all of those fears come up. When we can be service orientated, contribution focused, the nerves are still there, but it's not all about us. And so it's easier to manage the situation. But Kurt, again, I'd say take a journal and write down, what are your wins from the last 90 days? Who were you? Who would the version of you in? So I don't know how old you are, but use the equivalent thing. The 20-year-old version of you, what would they say about where you are now? And I'm sure they'd go, wow, I'm blown away about what you've done. So look for the evidence. Where are your skills? Where are you great at? What do you love to do? How do you spend time there so that you can get confidence in other ways? Maybe start a sport. Maybe and that's why this process of creating micro wins is how you build the confidence, because it's saying, well, I was going to do that and I did it and I showed myself, and it's progress. That's again what builds confidence. So I hope, but that self-belief is everything. So, and also, be aware of the inner critic. If you've got nasty thoughts, don't believe them. They're not true. Channel the inner coach and just have an anchor thought ready. I've got this. I always make a plan, so that as your mind starts to focus to fear, you move the focus to a better place. And it's not about false positive thinking, but if you follow that thought and you go down the rabbit hole of that thought, it's going to pull you down to a place of fear. And when we're sitting in fear, we never see the possibilities. So it's, how can you start to move up into courage, into acceptance, into joy? Am I missing anything else? What if someone mistreated me because of my mistakes? What if someone mistreated me in social media? Is it because he or she can't forgive me? If they've currently mistreated you in social media, so I always say you can always behave your way back into trust. And we've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. We've all said things or done things, and maybe because we were angry. So I would say the first thing is forgive yourself, because once you've forgiven yourself and said, okay, yes, I did this, but what did I learn? What would I do differently? I'm not sure what the situation is, if it warrants an apology or to say, I'd love to make this better. Have you tried that? Sometimes that's all people need, is an apology. If you have tried that and they are still engaging in this kind of behavior, then it's about saying, I've tried everything I can, but I need to let this person go. And maybe it's about letting go of a toxic relationship. Because if we've done everything that we can, but they're still holding a grudge, then we need to say, is this person really serving me? And I think so much of confidence as well is also, who do we surround ourselves with? If we share a goal, we want those people to say, wow, that's amazing. I know that you can do it. Not, are you kidding me? And social media is a really destructive place to go and criticize someone because it is so public. So I hope that that's given some things to think about. There's an amazing book called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. It's a really fantastic read about managing forgiveness, whether with yourself or with others. It was really an eye-opener for me, if that'll help you as well. So we are on 10 o'clock. So Mind Journal team, I'm not sure if that is our time, if we've got time for other questions, if you can just, oh, thanks. Is it Winnie or yeah, is it Winnie? Well, thank you so much. And I hope that that's helped. And if anyone needs to send me an email, maybe you didn't want to ask a question, it's Lori@beyondthedress.co.za. I think that I have covered all of the questions that were here. So thank you everyone for showing up. Mind Journal, thank you for having me. What a privilege to be with your community today. So thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.